82-year-old Clara sat quietly at her kitchen table, the late afternoon sun painting soft golden patterns on the faded linoleum floor. Outside the window, hummingbirds darted between flowers, their tiny wings buzzing like a gentle song. Clara used to love watching them, they reminded her of all the lively moments she'd shared in this house. But today, even the hummingbirds couldn't lift the heavy feeling in her chest. Clara reached for the pale blue envelope that had been sitting untouched on her counter for days. It was from her doctor. She had told herself she would open it tomorrow, and then the next day, always finding small excuses to avoid it. But deep down, she knew. The aches in her joints, the way her heart raced after a short walk, the emptiness that settled in the quiet evenings, they all whispered the same truth. With trembling fingers, she finally tore it open. Her eyes scanned the words, "Clara, your recent tests show an increased risk of heart disease. You need to watch your diet, stay active, and maintain social connections. Isolation and poor nutrition are silent killers at your age. And remember, finding a sense of purpose is just as important as physical health." Clara let out a shaky breath, her eyes blurring with tears. Memories rushed over her like a wave, her husband's warm laugh, the kids running through the house, the long dinners filled with stories and love. Now, the rooms echoed only her footsteps. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling her heart beat against the thin paper. She realized she had spent so many years caring for everyone else, always putting her needs last. Now, in the stillness of her life, she saw how deeply she had neglected her own health and happiness. As the sun dipped lower, Clara closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "It's not too late. I don't want to be another silent statistic." In that moment, Clara made a silent promise. She would find a way to fight back, to reclaim her joy, and maybe, just maybe, to live beyond the numbers on a doctor's page. The next morning, Clara sat at her kitchen table, her mind still swirling with the words from the letter. She sipped her tea slowly, each swallow heavy with worry. The house felt colder than usual, and the silence seemed to echo off the walls. She was lost in thought when suddenly, there was a soft knock at the door. Clara hesitated. She wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, she stood up, her joints protesting with each step. As she opened the door, she was met with a small, nervous smile. It was Tommy, the 9-year-old boy from next door. Tommy stood there clutching a plate covered with a floral napkin. "Hi, Miss Clara," he said shyly, shifting from foot to foot. "My mom made cookies, and she thought, maybe you'd like some." Clara looked at the boy, her heart catching in her throat. She hadn't had a visitor in weeks, and certainly not someone so young and bright-eyed. She managed a small smile. "Why, thank you, Tommy. That's very kind of you." Before she could invite him in, Tommy blurted, "Can I stay and play? Mom says you might like some company today." His eyes sparkled with innocent hope, and Clara felt her walls begin to crumble. She opened the door wider and nodded. "Of course. Come in." Inside, they set up a board game on the kitchen table, an old set Clara hadn't touched in years. Tommy explained the rules excitedly, his words tumbling over each other in his eagerness. Clara listened, laughing softly at his animated gestures and silly sound effects. They played for hours, pausing only to nibble on cookies and share stories. Tommy talked about school, his favorite superheroes, and his dreams of becoming an astronaut. In return, Clara told him about her garden, her children when they were his age, and the old adventures she had with her late husband. For the first time in years, Clara felt her heart lighten. The laughter that filled her kitchen was like a forgotten melody returning home. She realized then that loneliness was not just an emotion but a silent illness, slowly stealing life from the inside out. That day, Tommy didn't just bring cookies, he brought light, warmth, and the first spark of healing Clara didn't know she needed. The morning after Tommy's visit, Clara woke up feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, anticipation. As she sat at her kitchen table, sipping her tea, she thought about the laughter, the games, and the spark of life Tommy had reignited. She realized that she didn't want that feeling to fade away. She glanced at the letter from her doctor once more, the words, "Stay active," and "Find purpose," standing out like bright beacons. Clara had spent so many years drifting through her days, her world shrinking to the walls of her home. But something inside her had shifted. She picked up the phone and called the local community center. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as she explained she wanted to volunteer. The woman on the other end was delighted, telling Clara about a community garden that always needed helping hands. They invited her to join the next day. The following morning, Clara pulled on her old sun hat and gardening gloves. As she stepped outside, the fresh air kissed her face, and for the first time in years, her steps felt purposeful. When she arrived at the garden, she was greeted by a colorful patchwork of flowers and vegetables, and a small group of volunteers with warm smiles. At first, she felt unsure, her hands felt clumsy, her knees creaked when she bent down, and she worried she might be more of a burden than a help. But a kind woman named Elsie handed her a small tray of seedlings and guided her gently. "Just tuck them in like they're babies," Elsie said with a wink. Clara laughed and knelt beside the flower beds. As she pressed the seedlings into the earth, she felt her heart beating with a new rhythm. Around her, people shared stories, exchanged gardening tips, and celebrated each tiny sprout as a triumph. They shared fresh vegetables from the garden and swapped recipes, encouraging each other to eat healthier and stay active. Slowly, Clara found herself part of something larger than her own worries, a living, breathing community. Each seed she planted felt like a small promise to herself, to live with intention, to nourish her body and soul, and to rediscover the joy of simply being alive. As summer turned to fall, the community garden flourished. Bursting tomatoes, tall sunflowers, and rows of carrots and lettuce transformed the space into a colorful sanctuary. Clara, once a quiet shadow in her own home, had become the heart of the garden, the one who always had an encouraging word and a gentle smile for everyone. One crisp morning, as Clara was trimming herbs, she noticed a frail, elderly man standing at the garden gate. His shoulders drooped, his eyes looked distant, and his hands trembled as he clutched a cane. Clara recognized that look, the same hollow loneliness she had felt before Tommy's visit. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Hello there," she called warmly. "I'm Clara. Would you like to come in?" The man hesitated, shuffling awkwardly. "I'm George," he finally murmured. I used to garden with my wife. She passed away last year, and I don't know, I thought I'd just watch." Clara felt a pang of empathy. Without a second thought, she held out her hand. "How about we plant something together? I could use an extra set of hands." George looked at her, eyes welling up with tears, then slowly nodded. Clara led him to a small patch of soil and handed him a few marigold seedlings. His hands shook at first, but Clara gently guided him, showing him how to tuck each fragile plant into the earth. As they worked side by side, George began to talk, about his late wife's love for roses, the recipes they used to cook, and the quiet mornings they shared over coffee. Clara listened intently, nodding, laughing, and even tearing up with him. When they finished, George looked at the neat row of marigolds and smiled, a deep, genuine smile that transformed his weary face. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know I needed this." In that moment, Clara realized that the greatest gift we can give is to remind someone they're not alone, that their life still holds meaning and warmth. As she hugged George goodbye that day, Clara felt a surge of joy and purpose stronger than any medicine. In helping him heal, she had healed herself even more. The garden wasn't just a place to grow plants. It had become a sanctuary for growing hope, love, and new beginnings.